Okay, thank you everyone for coming. I'm very grateful. I think that I have to say a few things about the film, this first film, before we start, just to help us. This film is 7 minutes long and has the editing speed of a commercial. Now, it's not a commercial, but part of this film is an exploration on not telling stories by allowing the story to be visible, but to reach almost your unconscious. So the way this film is structured is that something could be happening in reality, something could be happening in the imagination of the actors. Some of the things that are happening in the past, some things are happening in the present, and some things could happen in the future. And there is no distinction in the narrative between these levels. The story gets told in that fluctuation. So I have to say this because normally when you see a short movie, you have a fairly straightforward story. It comes to a conclusion and there is some kind of point. There's some kind of clear conclusion. Here, it starts at that speed, moves at that speed, and the entire story is lost unless you really understand that that's the only way the film will be accessible to you. So that's why I have to say that warning a little bit, because it's not like a conventional short film. It's more like a film poem or a piece of moving art that is involving actors, so that every scene itself will stand aesthetically for something. So I'll just say that off the top, and then we'll watch it and we'll see how it impacts. This film was shot with special Super 8 cameras that had 16:9 gates, and then was transferred at the highest level of resolution available at that time. The point was that the texture that we're going to see, all of this film texture, was the very fine grain structure is part of the movie. So, and the thing is, with a lower resolution copy of the film, you don't actually see the fine structure, because every single frame has that kind of quality to it. Every single frame has a physicality. We'll get an impression of it, but in the higher resolution version, you actually feel how every frame has this kind of roughness, has this kind of filtering and difficulty. The material is struggling. But that's just a note on this. Now, this film was shot in a bar in Berlin called the Bar 25. And the Bar 25 was the most alcohol and drug consumed space in Berlin for years. Entirely peaceful, completely untroubled by the police, but an intense space where people would disappear and party from Tuesday till Sunday, nonstop. And they would stay on this area, in this kind of world that they created. And it was a party space that was directly on the water in Berlin, so you had a beautiful water view as well, and there were the places to sleep and cottages, etc. And so this party community was so important to Berlin culture that it was even recognized by the politicians as being a unique Berlin institution. And the main character of this movie is somebody who disappeared into this whole party space for weeks on end. And along with many of the other people there, didn't work and basically just existed in this microcosm of this party space, which is not just a party in the sense of just music and drugs and alcohol, but actually a very kind of bizarre community, attracting people from all over the world who came and basically descended into this space for whatever length of time. And the film is a kind of a contemplation, a metaphor about what happens to people on some level that go through that kind of self-exploration.
And one sense of being released from some terrible burn. And that is really the feeling I get from this place. Why do you stay with me? I can tell you who I was.
But I know. Can you remember anything about this hotel?
The only thing that keeps coming back again and again is the water glass on the windowsill. Every time I try and get up in my dream to go to the window, I can't. So I reach out with my hand and play with the reflections. I need to be alone. Good to see you. Nice to have you here, man. Give me just 1 second. I'll be right back. I have a question for you. What did we talk about when I last saw you? I mean, what was the very last thing I said to you?
I think you said that you like my energy. That you are a lost soul moving from energy field to energy field. You always talk that way. That makes you interesting. Do you think of you know.
The first film, Fetish, this was a contemporary composition, especially made for the movie. So and this was a full symphony orchestra that recorded the music for that film. The idea behind Fetish was, as a graduating film, I wanted to have take advantage of the most amount of freedom possible, which was to have as elaborate imagery, but also to have music that was as contemporary or as sophisticated in a sense in terms of interpretation as the film itself. So that was the intention behind that. In 8.5 millimeter, the music that is used there was actually made by the editor who was involved in the editing process. All of these films are distinguished by a very long editing process. For example, 8.5 millimeter had 3 editors working on it, and I think the editing period for the Fetish had an editing period of something like 4 months.